last two times we spoke about different parts of what it means to have Kedushas Shevi'is, and probably not the next time, but two times we'll talk about the big thing of Kedushas Shevi'is, which is how you actually treat food that has Kedushas Shevi'is when you have it, but how you eat it and you don't waste it and things like that. That's going to be not probably next time, probably the time afterwards. But now, and for next time, we're going to talk about knowing which foods actually have Kedushas Shevi'is to them. Okay, how do we talked about before, like what are the rules of having something Kedushas Shevi'is? Now, well, how do you know which things do or don't have Kedushas Shevi'is? I'm going to be talking about today a few specific topics. So before I tell you, I'm going to tell you the things that we're not going to talk about. I got to tell you, anyhow, which is, first of all, we talked already two different things already, which is one is how do you know which year something is from? Like the peppers we're talking about right now. How do you know which year the produce is from to decide if it's Shemitah produce? Like, for example, if we had an orange now from Eretz Yisrael, that would not be Shemitah produce, even though it's Shemitah. That has to do with what has Kedushas Shevi'is, and also the borders of Eretz Yisrael. Those are two things we spoke about in the past to determine what does or doesn't have Kedushas Shevi'is. And two things we'll talk about in Eretz Yisrael in the future are what about people who hold the Het Mechira? Does the Het Mechira mean that something doesn't have Kedushas Shevi'is? And what happens to things that have Kedushas Shevi'is, but the time of beer already passed? Okay, that's what we'll talk about also in the future, whether those things still have Kedushas Shevi'is. Okay, so those are the things we're not talking about today, whether it doesn't have Kedushas Shevi'is. So what I'm going to start by telling you is like this. We know that there are specific ways that you're supposed to use things that have Kedushas Shevi'is. And we're going to talk about, again, in the future, of exactly how you're supposed to use it. You can use it for this, and you can not use it for this. The different rules of what you could use it. Those rules of what you're allowed to use it is intertwined with the din of what does have Kedushas Shevi'is. Only those things that are used in the way that are used in the way that you're allowed to use something on Shevi'is are the things that have Kedushas Shevi'is. So, if you have an apple, my big green apple, if you have an apple, apples are used for eating by people, and since apples are usually used for a thing that has Kedushas Shevi'is, the way that Shevi'is produce could be used, therefore, apples have Kedushas Shevi'is. Alfalfa is fed to animals, so since feeding animals is something that you're allowed to do with Perish Shevi'is, therefore alfalfa has Kedushas Shevi'is because it's used as for something that people would be allowed to do things with Kedushas Shevi'is. Okay, so that's one rule, which is that the rules of how you use Kedushas Shevi'is and what has Kedushas Shevi'is sort of are the same. If this is something that could be, that the usual use is a way that has Kedushas Shevi'is, that you could do with a Shemitah produce, then this thing has Kedushas Shevi'is. It goes together. Now, also, is that there are certain things that don't have Kedushas Shevi'is. Really, the rule is what you're allowed, what has Kedushas Shevi'is is things that grow from the ground and are primarily used for eating by humans and by animals. There are a few other little uses, but mainly things that are eaten by animals and humans and that grow from the ground. So, lafuke, salt, or a piece of meat, they don't grow from the ground. Okay, so they don't have Kedushas Shevi'is, even if they're the produce of this year, because they don't grow from the ground, so those things don't have Kedushas Shevi'is. The next is, an extension of that is, the contemporary person talk about is that mushrooms don't have Kedushas Shevi'is, because mushrooms, the Gemara's words are, the Gemara's not talking about mushrooms, the Gemara says this, I forgot the exact words, only things that have a shirish are things that have Kedushas Shevi'is, and therefore in din, even though for certain din, mushrooms are considered that they are considered to be attached to the ground, for this they consider they don't have a shirish. The Gemara's definition is it has to have a shirish, that's what has Kedushas Shevi'is, and therefore since the mushrooms don't have a shirish, a number of contemporary points can say that mushrooms don't have Kedushas Shevi'is. We had mentioned this in passing once before. Okay. Another thing is, lumber that you use for construction, okay, it goes in the ground, but the use that you do with it is something that you're not allowed to use Kedushas Shevi'is for those kind of things for building. We'll talk about why in a second. You're not allowed to use things that have Kedushas Shevi'is for building, therefore lumber doesn't have Kedushas Shevi'is. And similar to that is cotton, which is even more, it seems like a plant that grows all the time. It's more planty than the tree is. Cotton is used for making clothing. You're not allowed to use things with Kedushas Shevi'is to make clothing with, and therefore cotton doesn't have Kedushas Shevi'is. The strands of cotton don't have Kedushas Shevi'is to them. Cotton seeds, Rabbi Yisrael was just saying this, cotton seeds do have Kedushas Shevi'is because they're Michael Behema, and actually now they're even a little bit Michael Ogden because they make cottonseed oil. But cotton seeds do have Kedushas Shevi'is, but the cotton, the fibers that you make clothing out of, does not have Kedushas Shevi'is.
This is kind of different, and usually, don't we usually say, like, we determine the status of the item, and then you can, based on that, you can say what you're left to with it. Here, we're going the opposite.
Well, it's the same, right? Yes. Well, it's really the same. The rules are the same, but the how you could use it is, if I could use it, more famous. That's more well known, how you can use things with Shevi'is. There's lots of dinner about that. But the other side of that coin is, only those things that are used in that way have Kedushas Shevi'is. That's how it goes together. Yes. Okay, and the last thing is we had mentioned that things that used to be edible and they're no longer edible don't have Kedushas Shevi'is anymore. Once they become not edible, those things lose. They don't have Kedushas Shevi'is anymore. For example, if your apple rots and becomes not edible anymore, it doesn't have Kedushas Shevi'is anymore. Once it becomes not edible, Kedushas Shevi'is. Not roy for Shemitah use. We're going to talk about it a little bit more. Yes, it's like feeding people. It's known for people, but now it's for animals. It would still have Kedushas Shevi'is. Michael Behem is also a thing that
this thing was not
originally it's Michael Adam. Now it's only suitable Michael Behem, but it's still an appropriate. Yes, but we're going to talk in a second more about the Michael Behem Shiloh. But yes, it has to be not royal for Michael Adam, not royal for Michael Behem, not royal for any of the uses for Shemitah. There's other uses you could use it for illumination. You can make like a candle out of it. There's other uses, but the main ones are eating for people and humans, people and animals. There are other little uses, but those are the main ones. Okay, now the truth is, what is going on? The truth is that it's a little bit more than that. Okay, it's a little deeper. Okay, what we're about to say now comes from Gemara and Sukkah. It says like this: the pasuk says, and then it finishes off. The Torah says you should use the produce of this year should be lachem la'acham. And the Gemara says that there's two opposite mashmois from this pasuk. Okay, the word lachem is mashma lachem l'chotz rechechem. The produce of this year is for you, for whatever you want to do with it. You can do whatever you want to with it. But on the other hand, the word la'achla is mashma la'achla. Now, the words that are there are not exactly the words of the Gemara, but la'achla v'lo davarachi. Not you're supposed to eat it and not do other things with it. Okay, so the Gemara says we have opposite mashmois in the pasuk. Lachem is mashma. You could do whatever you want to with it. It's yours. It's lachem. It's for you. Do whatever you like to with it. And la'achla is mashma. No, you can only eat it. Okay, so the Gemara says that it seems to be a steer in the same pasuk of what you're allowed to do with it. The Gemara has a machlokes of how to be miyash of that, and the assumption is that the din is as follows. We learn from here that there are two rules, and the basic rule is you can use Shemitah produce for anything that's similar to achila. Lachem la'achla means is you can use it for achila. And lachem means it's an expanded achila. Anything that's like achila is the kind of thing that you could use this to use for. But if it's not like achila, then you're not allowed to use it. Okay, you can't just use it. You can't use it whatever. I don't know. I'll give you examples in a second. Sorry, I'll give you examples in a second. Okay, so now that means this. That teaches us two rules. The first rule is that it has to be hanasan ubiru shava. It has to be that just like when you eat something, as I destroy it by eating it, that's when I have the hana from it. I eat my banana. As I'm eating it, I'm destroying it. So too, you could use it for other uses that are destructive. While you have the hana, that's when you destroy the thing also. And the Gemara says, lafuke, you can't use, if you have something from Shemitah, you can't burn it, you can't use a piece of wood and make charcoal out of it, because there the hana comes after you destroy it. First you burn it, and then once you've burnt it and you've destroyed it, now the charcoal that's left is what you use for cooking. So the Gemara says would not be an appropriate use for something for Shemitah, and the Mela, wood that's used for burning, doesn't have Kedushas Shevi'is. It goes together. It's not also you in Shabbat, because when you're burning it, that's not when you have the hana from it. After you've destroyed it, now you have the hana from it, so it's not considered hana also biur Shabbat and doesn't have Kedushas Shevi'is. Okay. Now, you use it for that, and the Mela doesn't have Kedushas Shevi'is. Okay. The other rule is...
In other words, wood is used for hasak.
Yeah, for burning, for wood. Let's use for cooking. Let's use for cooking. Yes. Okay, we're not talking about, there's other ways of using wood. We're not talking about that. Okay, now, the other rule we learn is that just like achila is a davar hashav l'chol nefesh, you're probably familiar with that, like from the Hilchos Yom Tov rules, as davar hashav l'chol nefesh, everybody eats, everybody appreciates eating food, so too, you can only use things that are davar hashav l'chol nefesh, la'afuke, this is a more famous exception, la'afuke, what the Gemara calls, what Mishnah calls mulugma, which means it's refuah. If you have a food that's a Shemitah food and you want to rub into your skin because it'll be a good cream, you want to use it for some kind of a medicinal purposes, you're not allowed to do the things that have Kedushas Shevi'is because that's not Shavul Chol Nefesh. Only sick people need that. Healthy healthy people don't need that. And therefore, we learn that from Lachem Lachal that it should be for use for eating type uses. So just like for eating, everybody has enough from eating, so too, you can only use it, you cannot use it l'melugma, you can use it for a food, you can't use the Kedushas for any kind of thing that's only for certain types of people appreciate it. Okay? So those are the general rules. I'm going to give you some specifics in a second.
Right, and the flip side is that if it's a type of product that can only be used for food, then it wouldn't have to be used for food.
I didn't want to say that, but yes, that's true. What Rabbi Rish just mentioned, that he says that if it only uses l'melugma, then it doesn't have to use Kedushas Shevi'is. This is basically, right, we're ignoring, there's a well-known Kesef Mishnah about this din who maybe says opposite. Okay, but we're ignoring it, yes, but Rabbi Rish said it is assumed to be correct. I didn't want to say that specifically, but yes, it's true that if the second side of the coin, as I said, is if the use is a kind that's only Kedushas Shevi'is, is only for a way that's not Kedushas Shevi'is, that you couldn't do something with Kedushas Shevi'is, that reason, let's say it wasn't Hanas Abir and Shava, doesn't have Kedushas Shevi'is either. Okay, so now we have two things to talk about that have to do with this. And that the first is something that you may have heard the term, something called Yevul nochri. Okay, produce from a non-Jew's field. Okay, and you see in Eretz Yisrael, they actually they put it on the packages, they put a sticker on the thing that says that it's Yevul nochri. Okay, they put it on there, and you'll hear why in a second. Why do they tell you that it's Yevul nochri? They don't tell you everything else about the thing, but for Shemittah in particular, there's a lot of disclosure. Okay, everyone has different shittas. A lady said to me, she says, "What am I supposed to do? I'm making a wedding in Eretz Yisrael." She says, and I don't know what to serve the people. Because some people want produce from Goyim, some people don't want produce from Goyim, some people want het mechir, some people don't want. So what am I supposed to serve that everyone will eat? I mean, the best we come up with is just chicken. You know, just serve no fruits and vegetables. So the mushrooms. There we go, chicken and mushrooms. I didn't think of mushrooms. Chicken and mushrooms. Okay. Soda. Okay. No. Okay. So what is Yevul nochri? We're going to do. There's a very long-standing argument. You may have heard this, which is a machlokes in the Beis Yosef and the Mabit. When Yidden was starting to come to Eretz Yisrael 500 years ago, there was a big machlokes, and it was a very public. You see from the tshuvas that are written, it was a very public machlokes. Each side was taking very public stands about this din, and the Beis Yosef held that things that grow in a goy's field do not have Kedushas Shevi'is. And the Mabit held that no, if it goes in a goy's field, it has Kedushas Shevi'is anyhow, even though it grew there. Okay, and there were riots back and forth. The specific application they were talking about, or the part that was more public, was whether you have to be mafresh Trumas Meises, which is the other side of the coin. Because if it's Shemittah produce, there's no chiv of Trumas Meises on Shemittah produce, and the Beis Yosef held it does not have Kedushas Shevi'is, and if you have to be mafresh Trumas Meises, and the Mabit held that it has Kedushas Shevi'is, and if you don't have to be mafresh Trumas Meises.
It's like it has to be Ruach Yisrael, though.
It has Ruach Yisrael, yes. So that was a public part of it. There was a whole demonstration. They were mafresh Trumas Meises. It was a whole to do how they did this. It was a whole
nothing to do with the Kenyan.
Yes. It's just partial. No, it's yes. It's way there. Yes, it's way there. Yes. So what happened is. We're going to skip ahead a few hundred years, and what happened is that
everybody agrees that it's keep Trumas Meises on this produce.
On a guy's produce, yes.
The other 6 years.
If, like he said in Ruach Yisrael, yes. If a yid did certain parts of the malach, but if it grew on a guy's produce, yes. So what happened is that the minig, what they call the minig Yerushalayim, which is to say the old minig in Eretz Yisrael, the minig that was around for a long time in Eretz Yisrael was, they followed the Beis Yosef. But the Beis Yosef says that everybody agreed with him except for the Mabit. That's what the Beis Yosef says in his time, and everybody followed that. And the Pasuk Shulchan says that, which is where it came from, that's the Minig Yerushalayim. What they call the Minig Yerushalayim, the Beis Yosef had no Kedushas Shevi'is. Which, as we talked about, that opened up the possibility of buying produce from Goyim. Okay? If you remember of Cook's letter about how horrified he was. He wasn't about the din, but about the idea that you'd buy from the Goyim. That was very upsetting to him. And when the Chazon Ish came, he said he thought the din was like the Mabit. And so in Bnei Brak, they hold that Yevul nochri has Kedushas Shevi'is to it. And those who, now it's a little bit spread past Bnei Brak, people who follow the Shita of Chazon Ish say that Yevul nochri has Kedushas Shevi'is. Now, as I said to you the other time, everyone agrees that there's no Isser Svichen on Yevul nochri. So when you see that package that said on it, Yevul nochri, the people who follow what they call the minig Yerushalayim, those people don't have Kedushas Shevi'is at all. They do whatever they want to. They eat it completely. They completely. It's as if it came from Chutz La'aretz. The people in Bnei Brak would say it's not Svichen, but they would treat it with Kedushas Shevi'is. So if you serve that at the Chazon, they would. The people in the people right here. Yes, you're right. Yes. So yes. So would it be Ruach Yisrael?
They buy it in a package already.
No. But it did happen. The rule happened when they bought the chickpeas to make that hummus. They bought the chickpeas from the guy, and then the Yid processed it. Then so now that means is if they serve that hummus or hummus at a person at the wedding that I was talking to you about, the people from nearby could eat it. They would just eat it with Kedushas Shevi'is. Okay, and then the waiters who are following Yerushalayim would throw it in the garbage, the leftovers. Okay, but the people there, they could eat it still. No, the Yevul nochri just tells the people, you might think this has Kedushas Shevi'is, but you can eat it. It's not tzvichen. Okay, so
in the kosher letter that's sitting on the table.
okay, so now,
Does it make a difference how the Kohen acquired the sodas?
interesting question. I don't know what made you think of the question, but I'm about to tell you a riot.
Mishnahs.
Okay, I'm going to tell you one of the riots. There's many riots back and forth. I'm sorry, I have to tell you one thing before I get to that, which is this question about whether Yevul nochri does or doesn't have Kedushas Shevi'is is intertwined with the question we spoke about some time ago, which is the mitzvah of Shemittah a mitzvah on the person or a mitzvah on the land? If we say it's a mitzvah on the person, okay, or both. If we say it's a mitzvah on the person, the mitzvah relates to the person. And you see comments over here. If it relates to the person, then we say, well, if it belongs to a guy, this we could say is it belongs to the guy. He doesn't have a mitzvah Shemitah. What we say a nafka. Maybe it's maybe not hefker until the person mafker it because it depends on the person. So then again, the guy owned it. He didn't have the mitzvah Shemitah. On the other hand, if it's a mitzvah on the land and whoever happens to be there is responsible for it, then the mitzvah on the land is irrespective of who owns it. There's no difference if it's a Yerukah. Okay. The other ways of saying this. Now, the Beis Yosef brought a raya from Gemara, Yerushalmi, like this. Okay, here's what Yerushalmi says. Okay, Yerushalmi says like this. It's at the end of the 9th paragraph. It says, Rabbi Shua ben Levi have a mifkid of Talmidim. Rabbi Shua ben Levi was telling his Talmidim, he was sending them shopping. Okay, and he said to them, like Tizben liyerak, elam and ginsa de Sisra. When you buy me vegetables, buy them to me from the garden of Sisra. Okay, what on earth does that mean, the garden of Sisra? That means is that there was Sisra was way back when, 1,000 years from before Rabbi Shua ben Levi lived. There were lands that they believed Sisra had owned, and Yidden had never captured those lands from Goyim. It had never been captured. So these are lands that never got Kedusha of Eretz Yisrael to them. Yidden never were kovish these lands. So he said, I want you to buy me vegetables from Ginsa de Sisra. That place, that garden in that's called Ginsa de Sisra, because we have a server that it was owned by Goyim all the way back since the time of Sisra. It's 1,000 years. It's been owned by Goyim. That's where I want you to buy my vegetables. Okay, that's what he told them when he sent them shopping. So, Kol Imei Zachal Atayv. So these Talmidim met Eliyahu Zachal Atayv. Eliyahu Zachal Atayv. They met Eliyahu, and nonetheless, Eliyahu told them, Ezel Emel Rabbah. Go tell your Rebbe, let's have our Ginsa de Sisra. You think that place is Ginsa de Sisra? It's a mistake. It's really not Ginsa de Sisra. And so therefore, you think you should go buy from this and this place. It's not true. It's not really, when you call Ginsa de Sisra, it has this name that's been around since Sisra owned it. It's not really true. But, rather, the Yehuda Havis really belonged to Jews, the Katlei, and he killed them. The Nasbemine, he took them away from them. Okay, so you think it's a land that always belonged to God. It's not true. Really, it belonged to Yidden, and they took it away from the Yidden. And in Be'isa Machmir al-Nafshach, if you want to be Machmir for this din, Ishtavu il-Charach. Okay? Now, so Eliyahu Navi told him,
What does that mean?
I'm going to tell you what that means in a second. Stop. I'm going to tell you what that means in a second. The last two words are very important. I'm going to tell you that in a second. Okay? So he told him it's not to get to the sister. So, Rabbi Shua ben Levi, before we get to the last two words, Rabbi Shua ben Levi was saying, this is, I don't know if exactly the way the page says it, Rabbi Shua ben Levi was saying that like the Mahayat. He didn't want to buy produce from a land that belonged to a guy because even though the land belonged to a guy, it would still have Kedushas Shevi'is to it. He wanted to buy from only from Ginsa de Sisra that never had Kedusha to it, but a land that only now belongs to a guy, but yesterday used to belong to a Yid. That's land he does not want to buy.
He stole it. It wasn't like he bought it from...
No, he's not worried about... He's worried about Shemitah. He's not worried about that it's stolen.
But maybe if I steal something
Kargen Nigzelis, right?
Yeah.
So therefore, it still has the shame of a Jew on it.
Okay.
But if a Yid would go ahead, if a guy would go ahead and bought it and got a contract from the guy, then maybe then it belonged to a guy.
The Avoyim stole right to
Right. It's been 500 years since someone stole it. It's been forever ago.
Not Lloyd, he killed him.
No, so Rabbi Shua ben Levi was worried. Rabbi Shua ben Levi was worried that he was getting the pros like the Mabit says. So he wanted to get stuff that had never been used. So basically says, and so what happened? So came along Eliyahu Navi and told him, you shouldn't be machmir for that. Now, there's three ways to read the end of that Gemara. What did Eliyahu Navi tell them? He says it's not getting to the Sisha. So what is it? So he says so there's three different ways to read the end of the Gemara. Let's take this. Okay, this is the beginning of the Gemara. So now, there's three ways to say it. Okay, the first way is the way the Marafulda says. Okay, the Marafulda says that it's like this in the Yerushalmi in Tamai. I didn't look at it, but that's what he says. It says, in Isa Machmer Mafshech, if you want to be Machmer, Ishtarui Lechavrech, which means is, if you want to be Machmer for only for this purported get to the sense of fine, don't bother everybody else. Don't Ishtarui Lechavrech, to your friends, let it go. Don't be Machmer for them. Don't make them be Machmer. So Eliyahu Navi is telling you, if you want to personally be Machmer about the Shiloh, you could be Machmer. But don't tell everybody else to be machmer. So don't go around spreading this thing that you should only buy from Ginsin to Sisra and let everybody else be makel. So Eliyahu Navi was telling them that everybody could be makel. He was leaving it open that maybe there's a mile to be machmer. He was making such a possibility. He was saying, don't bother everybody else. Leave everybody, let everybody be makel. If you want to be machmer, we could talk about that. You could think about that.
Why is it a chumrah?
Because he won't buy from, he'll treat Paris nochri as if they have Kedushas Shevi'is.
But he's saying it's not, he says it really belongs to a Yid.
You thought you were going to get into the Sisra. You only want to be machmir to buy from that field. This is the wrong field. This field is not getting to the Sisra. So now you're going to say, so I won't buy anything. If you want to be machmir and not buy because you think there's Kedushas Shevi'is, be machmir for yourself. But let everybody else be mekel. Let them buy it. Let them buy from, like the Beis Yosef says, to them it has no Kedushas Shevi'is, even from a field that's not getting to the Sisra. That's how the Gemara Full learns. Okay?
Isn't it used to belong to the Jew?
It used to belong to a Jew, meaning, that means so it had the Kedusha of Eretz Yisrael, and now that a guy owns it, so Rabbi Shua ben Levi said, if a Yid owns it, if a guy owns it now, it still has Kedusha
They're
to it.
missing words. In other words, in the Yerushalmi, they're missing words. He should have, he should have said, "Gam Zedek shel b'karle, this is the day nochri."
Right, that's what he was saying. That he was implying, yes. This is a regular Kedusha field.
Missing.
Yeah, okay, now, the Kesef Mishnah learns, the Kesef Mishnah says that the Girsa is, in Be'isa Machmal Nafshach, the last two words are, Ishtavui L'chavrach. You want to be machmir, you shouldn't be. You should make yourself similar to your friends. They're makel, the whole world is makel. You're the only one who has this idea to be machmir back into the Sisra. You shouldn't do that. Even you should be makel. In which case the Bishop says, look at this. Eliyahu Navi told him that this is a chumrah, it's incorrect. Eliyahu Navi's telling you to pass like me. So Rabbi Shua ben Levi held like the Mabit. Nobody else thought like that. And Eliyahu Navi told Rabbi Shua ben Levi, you shouldn't be machmir. That's it. No, because he brings it right. That's his girsa. Okay, and the Gra has a third girsa, and his third girsa is Ishtavei L'chavrei, which means is that field is the same as every other field. Ishtavei, that field L'chavrei, it is the same as every other field that's like it, so there's no advantage to this field over another. So Eliyahu wasn't commenting on whether you should pass him like the Beis Yosef or the Mabit. According to this Yerusha, Eliyahu Navi is just telling him, this field is no better than the other one, so now what you should do about that, that's your business. I'm not telling you what to do with it. But this field, this Ginsa de Sisra, is not really Ginsa de Sisra. It's really a field like every other field. It used to be owned by Yid, now it's owned by a guy. What you should do, I'm not telling you. But you should know that the fields are equal. Okay, so according to the Gemara, there's no right in either direction. We see Rabbi Shua ben Levi was being machmir, like the Mabit, but Eliyahu Navi didn't respond to anything that was a right. Okay. So you should just know this is a right that he brings. The Chazon Ish learns the Gemara differently. You can imagine. But the Chazon Ish learns the Gemara differently. He says there's no right b'chal from this Gemara. Because the Chazon Ish says the Gemara is not talking about whether it has Kedushas Shevi'is or not. What the Gemara was talking about, if you remember, what he asked him to buy was to buy him a yerek. So the Shaila here was a Shaila of Svichin. Of Svichin. Rabbi Shua ben Levi was, so everybody holds that land of a guy doesn't have Svichin to it. Rabbi Shua ben Levi was being even more machmir than that, to say, if it ever belonged to a Yid, it does have Svichin. If it ever belonged to a Yid, and Eliyahu Navi is telling him, no. If it even belongs to a guy now, there's no Isser Svichin. The word guy is Isser Svichin if it belongs to a guy. So then the Gemara
Levi didn't know that?
That was what he was being taught that. He learned that he didn't come to the share. You see Rabbi Shua ben Levi by the share? No, he didn't know that. So the Rabbi Shua ben Levi is being taught that there's only Isser Svichin if Yid's field, not from a guy's field. So according to Chazon Ish, there's no right from the Gemara. He holds the way the Gemara picked on a Yerek because he was telling him he didn't want to buy Svichim. That's what it was. Okay. One last right I tell you because we got to move on, and that is the Chazon Ish brings the right for himself. The Rambam says that, I keep mentioning this thing, that a guy's field, produce of a guy's field does not have Svichim to it. Does not have Svichim to it. So the Chazon Ish says, why does Rambam tell you that it doesn't have Svichim to it? Sure, it sounds like it's trying to tell you it doesn't have Svichim, but it does have Kedushas Shevi'is. If it wasn't Shemitah produce at all, why would he say it doesn't have the Isser Svichim? Why would he just say things that grow in the guy's field don't have any Kedusha at all to them? So that implication from that's a raya the Chazon Ish brings that tells you that stuff that grows on the guy's field really does have Kedushas Shevi'is. It just doesn't have the Isser Svichim.
I don't understand. Why would it have Kedusha for Trumas and Mises and not have Kedusha for Shevi'is?
Because there are different rules. Okay, that gets complicated into the din of the Kedusha was bottle or not bottle, and Shemitah rules are not the same as for Trumas and Mises. Even for Trumas and Mises it is chayiv, it may not be chayiv in Shemitah. Okay, the last thing we have to talk about is another question, and that is what Yossi sort of was hinting at this before, and that is like this: the din of Perish Shevi'is is you could eat them for people or to humans. People, I keep saying that. People or animals. Okay, people or animals. Okay, people or animals. Okay, so now the following shayla Chazon Ish is the following question: What do you say about something that's royal Michael Behema? But we're people who live in cities. We're city dwellers. We don't have any behemoths around. So, for my purposes, the olive pits. He talks about olive pits. Okay, what do you do when a person eats an olive? Okay, when he's left with a pit at the end of the olive, he lives in the garbage. It's royal Michael Behema. Not royal Michael Behema. I don't have any animals who could eat it. Well, who am I going to feed it to? I mean, maybe if I had a dog, I'd feed it to. But most people don't have animals to feed it to. He says, so even though in theory it's Michael Behema, and even if I lived on a farm, it would be Michael Behema, but I don't live in a farm. I live in the city. If you live in the city, this stuff is garbage. So the question is, does that food have Kedushas Shevi'is, or it doesn't have any more? Like we said before, the food has to rot. When we have an apple that rots to not being Michael Adam, so it doesn't have Michael Adam, but is it still royal Michael Behema? Presumably there's still a point that a Behema would eat it. But I don't have any Behema to feed it to. When my food looks like that, I throw it in the garbage. So should we look at it, if we could say it this way, should we look at it objectively, the way the Chazon Ish says, Kefi, what is his word? Kefi, I have it here something. Kefi Tashmas Hanos, the best way that it could be used. This food really could be fed to animals. It's still suitable to animals. Or should we say, it depends on Lamaisa. Can I do anything with this? Do I have any use for this food? No, I don't have any use for it. I'm going to throw it in the garbage. I don't save my olive pits to feed them to animals, or my date pits.
Is there a reason this would be different than other times where we use Wesley's Royal Achila for a behemoth, or not?
What do you mean?
In general, when we say that Royal Achila for Pesach, I don't have a dog. Okay, so I don't have an animal.
That's a good question. So over there we're trying to judge, is it even remotely edible? Mm-hmm. Even if edible to a dog is like remotely edible. Here we're trying to say, is there something to do with this thing, or is it garbage? When it's garbage, if there's no uses to it, it doesn't have Kedushas Shevi'is. I don't think it's exactly the same.
I don't know why isn't it right though?
That what?
Why isn't the criteria here? Is it remotely edible? Why here I'm allowed to say, well, I don't have a dog. You don't normally say that.
No, if you have nothing to do, I'm not sure. I think that it's that if you have nothing to do with this thing, it has no Kedushas Shevi'is. It will become not usable. Okay, now Chazon Ish brings a right from something like him, which is, he says, it's from Hilchos Klein. The Rambam says, I want to have it on the board, but I don't. Okay, the Rambam says in Hilchos Klein, that if a person plants things that he wants to. Next week's being orange juice on the board. Okay, that's all I have room for.
We're getting a text all day from Sears, and people want to know what happened to the orange juice. Sears came up with a new child. I said, no, just drink it and bring it to my house.
Okay, so the din says like this: if a person has climb that's growing, if he wants them to stay around, then the din is he wants them to be there. Then they become usher. If he doesn't care, then they're not usher. So the Rambam says, so for example, if you have kaitzim, some kind of a thorns growing in your field, in the wrong place, and you live in Saudi Arabia where they have camels who eat those kaitzim, then for you it's klayim, because you want to have those growing. To you it's meaningful to have those kaitzim because you have an animal to feed it to. He doesn't say this, but the implication is, and if you live in Poland and there are no camels and there's no one to eat these kaitzim, then it's not klayim. Why? Even though there are people who want this, even though there is a value to this plant, it is Michael Behema, there's someone who can eat this plant, but for me living in Poland, there's no Michael Behema. What am I going to do with these things? I don't have a camel.
But yeah, that same Shiloh we discussed, I'm just comparing by Bishop Yisrael. As long as you have one place where they go ahead and they eat it at this, so then it could be that everywhere needs to be Bishop Yisrael. So here too, as long as you have one place, I mean, I'm mixing apples and thorns.
But Bishop also, we don't go from country to country.
Sometimes we think that. Sometimes we think like that.
Yes.
Okay, so
the palm.
So the Chazon Ish says maybe we have a raya from there that we should depend on where you are. If for me it's no meaning of that, of course I don't do a Shemittah that day. But you see that if for me it's not worth anything, I live in a place where there's no camels. For me, having these kind of thorns means nothing. So then the din is it's not anything. It's not a food. He wants to bring a raya from that. The Chazon Ish, in one place is make like it. In the end, he says you should, in his instructions for people, he says, no, you should be machor on it. He doesn't want to be machor on it. He wants to be machor on it. The Shevet Levi has a tshuva about it, where he says, he only saw the first part of the Chazon Ish, which is what you should be mako. And he says, Be'etzem, he has all kinds of rights, he thinks you should be machor on the Shiloh. He doesn't know that there's the other part of the Chazon Ish who says to be machor. Maybe before they printed that part, this is from a long time ago. So he says, but he doesn't want to argue, he doesn't want to argue in the Chazon Ish, even Hachmer. He doesn't argue. Okay. But they say, Chaim Kanievsky brings it, the Chazon Ish himself was machmer in the Shiloh, and this Shiloh is very lemaisa, because the question is, when I have something that's, I have leftovers from my food. So we talked about, last time I think it was, what am I supposed to do with those leftovers? How do I let them sit till they're unusable and I get rid of them? But what's the gather of unusable? Does unusable mean not roy lachilas adam, which is relatively quick, because when it gets a little spoiled already, people are not going to eat it, or do I have to wait for it to be not roy l'maichel behema, which is much further. Okay, waiting for maichel behema, this is a very lamaisa question, is how much do I have to let the food become inedible before I say, forget it, I don't have to keep the same way, I have no Kedushas Shevi'is. It's a very lamaisa shayla. He brings it that Chazon Ish himself was personally machmer about this, that he himself would wait till it's not royal l'maichel behema, which is pretty standard to do that. Okay, I just have a question on this. Here's a question, which is like this. When we say that we're considering that since it's fit for maichel behema, therefore I should still have Kedushas Shevi'is to it. Now, what happened to the rule that I told you that something has to be shavu l'chol nefesh? Okay, if something is not shavu l'chol nefesh, then doesn't have Kedushas Shevi'is. Now, 500 years ago, when everybody lived in agricultural society, animal food was shavu l'chol nefesh, because animals were all over the place. But in Chicago, shavu l'chol nefesh? Is it shavu l'chol nefesh to say that this rotting banana is shavu l'chol nefesh because I can feed it to an animal? What are you talking about? No one's got animals. Well, why would you say shavu l'chol nefesh? It's like saying something's not shavu l'chol nefesh when it's for sicknesses, for health, because not everybody's sick. Well, okay, we have less people who have animals than who are sick. I mean, how many people are there in Chicago who have, well, maybe they're together. I mean, the people who have animals in their houses, you're right. Okay, but how many people are there who live in this area who have that policy? Okay, but not in Chicago. You live in your
want to nullify the whole.
So why are we declaring?
You should be able to feed the animals anymore.
No, if you live in a farm, we're here at shavu l'chol nefesh. Here in this area, it's shavu l'chol nefesh because people have to give it to their animals. Like, if you have leftovers in a manufacturing facility, you take that stuff and make it to animal food. But you have leftovers in Chicago, you don't feed it to an animal. You're not going to shavu l'chol nefesh.
I'm not allowed to feed animals.
Well, you'd not be allowed to, yes. And I'm saying, I don't know if this is what you mean. I'm saying we should go on each area by itself. The truth is, you're right. You were implying that if we looked at the whole of Eretz Yisrael, we would say it's not shavu l'chol nefesh. In some places they do, and some they don't. I'm being a little nicer to say we should judge it community by community. We live in a rural place, or we live in a city, and we depend on how we're.
I don't understand that either. Why do you go by? You don't go by neighborhood, by city.
Well, it's saying
go a few miles, drive a half hour. That's not enough to make a different area.
So you want to say is that it should not be shavu l'chol nefesh because since there's big parts of the country that couldn't kill it.
Whatever you define it,
okay, I'm not going as strong as that. Okay, you can say
that you won't be able to feed it.
So you're making the question stronger. I'm not going that far.
Well, how can you not go that far?
I'm thinking that shavu l'chol nefesh is by areas.
Yeah, let's get the area. Let's say we agree to the area. But in this area, it's not, most people don't have animals. So you're saying that
It's not Shavuot Nefesh.
it's a Shavuot, you can feed your animal.
And you can feed your animal. Right. You're stretching to say, even if I live in a farm, I can't feed to my animals because it's not Shavuot Nefesh, because the people in the cities don't do that. Because I'm not sure if we should go that far. Okay, that's the question. Okay, so I guess this question was bothering me. It's a people question. So one answer that I got was, some of you might know, Rabbi Tichol, he said to me, I asked him what he thought about it. He said to me, no, we see in the Torah that we call animals, we call them rechush. It's like possessions. He says, so the feeding something to an animal, or having them that's royal l'machal behema, is just like the Gemara says for Yom Tov, that if there's very sophisticated foods that poor people don't eat, that's considered Shavuot Nefesh, because they just don't have access to it. But if you fed it to them, they would be happy to eat it. And so too, having animals is considered to be a worthwhile possession. If I had the money, I had the space, and I had the expertise, I would love to have a bunch of animals in my backyard. If I had the conditions right, it's considered an advantage to have that. I'm missing in that I don't have those things, and therefore, it really is Shavuot Nefesh. I'm just not. It's just like I don't appreciate certain foods because I've never tasted them, and I don't have such a sophisticated palate. But if I was more, had more money, and I was able to afford it, I would appreciate it also. Here also, having animals and being able to feed them is a thing that's an asset, and since it's an asset, it is Shavuot Nefesh. Everybody would want to have it if they could. I don't have the money, I don't have the space, I don't know what to do with animals, but if I had all those things, the it's something that people would want. Okay, that was one possibility. I was thinking that maybe the whole question is a mistake. I was wondering if maybe the whole question is a mistake. And that is because, where did we get this rule that it has to be Shavuot Nefesh? Because the Torah says that it has to be lachem la'achla. We have this conflict between lachem and la'achla, so we said it teaches you that it has to be, there's an expanded view of la'achla. Not just la'achla, but even lachem la'achla, even things that are Shavuot Nefesh are also included. Yeah, well, what does the next pasuk say? The next pasuk says that you can also do a Shemittah is feed it to your animals. We're not married that you can feed it to animals because it's Shavuot Nefesh, because it's like la'achla. The reason why you're allowed to feed Kedushas Shevi'is to your animal is because the Torah says you can feed it to your animals. It doesn't have to fit into the rules of L'chem L'achla. L'chem L'achla is saying, not only could you eat it, you could do expanded things that are like eating, you could also do. Okay, that's fine. So if I want to know if I could make Hanukkah candles out of Kedushas Shevi'is, I have to see, is it L'chem L'achla or is it not L'chem L'achla? I have to see, is it like that or not? That's because the Torah doesn't say you could use it for fire. So I have to see, is it like that or is it not like that? But that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm allowed to use it for animal feed because the Torah said you could do it.
But that's an explanation on the pasuk preceding that?
It's a different thing. There's one heter la'achla.
No, I'm saying, but maybe the heter of the pasuk preceding is saying lahem la'achla. You should know it's not a design that you can give it also to your animal.
Okay, you could say that.
I don't know if it's an explanation.
Yes, you could say that.
Of what's going on.
You could say that. Yes, you could say that.
It doesn't go for everything, right? If the minute changed, in other words, let's say there's a certain food that everyone feed animals, and now nobody feeds the animals. You wouldn't say pasuk says so. You'd say
no, because it has to be royal behemoth.
So you need one food.
We need one food.
So carry pasuk, you need one
no,
food.
For each food that we have, we say, is this food fit for animals or is it not fit for animals? So I say,
let's say this food became not fit for animals, right?
Right.
Nobody feeds this animals anymore.
So
nobody
then
feeds
it's after dinner.
It's after dinner, right? You want to say, but the pasuk says, right?
No, because it's not l'behemoth.
Right. So you just need one food. You need one food to be carried the pasuk still.
No, I'm not.
If nobody feeds elephants,
no, I'm not trying to say that it's a team of the pasuk. We need to be mekayim something. I think the Torah says you can use Kedushas Shevi'is for eating, for things that are like eating, and for feeding to animals.
Okay,
so animals is not like the heter is not because it's like eating. It's because you're allowed to feed it to animals. Animal food is in the range of what you have. Doesn't have to be Shavuot Nefesh. The question is, it's not Shavuot Nefesh. I don't care. Doesn't have to be Shavuot Nefesh.
If people don't eat this anymore, most people don't eat a certain food anymore, then it's not going to be considered.
So you want to say, and I might be right. You want to say is that it gets to the point that it's not edible at all, so to speak, it's like totally not usable. Then it's not anything, not even Michael Behemo. So, and we should judge that by most people. Look around the world and see by most people is it royal like Michael Behemo or not. In which case it would lose. Because in Chicago, nobody feeds it to anybody. Right. Okay, you could say that.
It may depend on the type of animal, meaning that there are certain animals that people generally, have. Maybe this particular person doesn't have the animal, but, let's say there was a certain type of food or leftover that would be eaten by a rhinoceros, a hippopotamus.
Let's say.
So I don't think that it would be relevant to us. I think that it was only the type of foods that were eaten by camels or donkeys or, the animals.
Common animals.
Or common animals that people had. So if some of those animals are just not common anymore, then maybe we should treat it like,
not royal achila at all.
And the hippopotamus.
In which case, the end of your sentence is, and therefore, since the sheep are not common in Chicago, there are no sheep, so we should treat them as not common either.
There might be a page more about this. The more thing about muktzah. I think there's some exotic animals, some of these royal behema. What talks about that and shouts about some exotic animals.
Okay. So there's a point that you're arguing. You're saying like him, which is that it's not even royal at all, because it's as if this animal doesn't exist. I was actually going to not talk. There's an interesting part to that child. I'm not talking about it now. I was thinking about talking about that when it has a shot to do with sukkahs. Okay, maybe when we get there, we'll talk about it. Goes figure. It has a shot to do with a very interesting question. To me, it's interesting. Anyhow, maybe we'll talk about that part, that angle of it. But there's no argument. So I accept that you might say it's not royal achila at all. But I'm just my point is still there's what to argue that the rule of shavul chol nefesh doesn't have to apply to meichel behema. That doesn't say in the Torah. It says lachem lo'achol, that's for meichel adam. Whether for meichel behema has that rule, la dafka, does it have to fit that requirement?